All right, thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. I set up this meeting to create a better understanding from both sides as to like what entails UX, what entails engineering, how I can best help engineering, and as well a little bit perhaps create some alignment on my work for you. Part of this is kind of detailed at like immediate issues in progress. So like, hey, is there anything that I'm missing the boat on, that I'm not seeing that, but I have to go there and be there immediately in order to be of best service to engineering. And the other side is more of like create alignment on processes that we have or don't have, because there is some of that as well. And basically reduce those friction points. And so for example, from my side, I don't want to block any merges. At the same time, I want to, make things from the user's perspective viable. Be that with feature flags, for example, I think is a great tool in our toolbox, which we might or might not be using enough, or that we need to have a more informed discussion about, or a more standardized process around those. I think there's a lot of opportunities here to, give each other a high five and achieve better results. So to open up that discussion, I think we're not going to be able to discuss everything that's no baddie. We can always push things towards the next meeting. The idea is to do this kind of bi-weekly, and if it's less necessary, then we extend that recurrent period. If it's more necessary, we make it a little bit more more prominent every week. But I intend for it to not be too many times, and be mindful of everybody's time. But I would love to know from engineering perspective where UX can be of most help. Like, are there things unclear? Are there things apart from like the immediate issues? Like, are there processes that we think like, hey, this is where I need UX's help the most right now? Let me see, I put this together like a week ago, so I'm a little bit reading into my agenda points with like, how did I mean for this? But any discussion here is welcome.
As far as I'm concerned, in addition to understanding, where we're going with the feature, I find UX. I'm looking at UX from the issue weight angle, which means that if I understand, where we're going from a UX point of view, this is going to help me to break down a feature into MRs, right? So my breaking down of a feature into backend MRs is going to be related to my understanding of UX.
Great, thank you so much. So that is, as I see it, it is tailored towards, there is an issue, and when you encounter an issue, there should ideally be a figured out solution where we know what to implement, and based on that, the weight is either assigned or it is already existing, and only then we go into merge request scoping. Do I say that right?
Yeah. Yes. Take the example of the deploy keys for protected branches. Remember, you did the markup of what the deploy keys were going to look like, right? Into that drop down on protected branches. And once we agreed on the markup, to me, I had like a clear understanding of the overall UX in general for that added feature. But it was also a way for me to understand where I was going from a development point of view in terms of MR breakdown.
I'm thinking of that's a good idea. So things are rolling back into my head. I want to skip this a little bit on the process, because I did indeed think of this more tailored towards the current issues in progress. So I'm going to rephrase this. I'm going to push this down to the bottom, where come back to that. Sorry for a little bit of disorganizing. So in terms of currently in progress issues for this milestone, which you are currently working on, or about to work on, is there any issues that currently from a UX point of view, you are unclear or uncertain about, how to move forward? Because I'm trying to improve my vision as to, hey, I'm skipping the boat here, or I'm leaving things unattended. This is kind of like a little bit of where it can catch those things as well.
I think from my side of things, if things are unclear, we try really hard to bring those up as early as possible. Just because we don't want to start down the road of trying to build something that we ultimately don't know where we're going. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be perfect, though. I do actually quite enjoy like a little bit of wiggle room. And if I have I guess a blocking question, which is generally just me not being able to decide which way would be the best way to go, then those come up. But you're usually very good at jumping on those when they do come up and providing guidance. So.
I'm trying to up my game, so that is good to hear. Is there any current issue you are working on right now where you say like, hey, I would love your feedback there, or there's something that I asked you but you haven't reacted to?
No, nothing comes to mind.
Awesome, that is good to hear. In terms of UX involvement, like if nobody has any more comments to the previous point, I would like to briefly take you along on a little journey. So let me do that with my screen. So share my screen. I hope it's visible. I think so it is, because otherwise I don't know how I've done it all 300 times before this case. But this point I want to highlight, where does UX like involvement from engineering? For now, I'm gonna go just on like a global level. If we look at progressive delivery and we have our planning issues, we have our needs weight issue, where I assume that engineering is looking beyond the current milestone, just like more looking towards what is coming up next. UX has that same thing. We're mostly working ahead of the curve. So we have this kind of needs UX weight epic. We're not using it as an epic. It's just like, it's basically more of like, we use a description to have this kind of table to kind of organize things in that way. But what I'm ideally envisioning is that for some of these things, for example, I'm currently working on these issues, allow parent project developers to create pipelines for merge requests for fork MRs, cancel deployment jobs. Some things are kind of done, some things are less done or in a good spot or are up next. And one of the things I'm always wondering about, and I think this is the perfect question for this discussion is, for example, I am going into this new issue, implement blue-green switch on deploy boards. Let's open up that issue. And right now, there's some discussion. I see that Chinya is involved into this a little bit. There's some discussion with Orit going on, and there's this huge description. And now it's my job to make this into something that is A, gonna be good, and B, it's gonna be MVC. Who do I work with? How do I know who to mention, and who's gonna be my partners in crime to make this successful? And as a small addition to that, so though that's off on a tangent, I need to explore broad before I can explore narrow. Like, I'm always going to go beyond the current MVC scope when I'm ideating, and then I'm going to scope down in order to see, all right, what can we deliver for this first iteration? But how would you love for me to approach that problem I encounter when working ahead, so to say?
So since no one else is talking, I'll take a stab at that one. So generally, generally, Dimitri, we have different engineers that will be giving input to weight or research a particular item on the needs, weight, or research issue at least a milestone prior. And most of the time, but not always, the engineers that are asked to give input on those are the engineers that will end up doing the work. So you should be able to find out who to work with on that in terms of whatever engineer is doing the weighting. So if Etienne is weighting and giving input on a particular issue, then he would be the one that you would work with in terms of fleshing out that feature.
Yeah.
And if,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to open it up if anyone sees that differently or wants to chime in, but that's how I would say it should work.
I think that's right, except that if Dimitri is working so far in the future, milestones and milestones ahead, then there's no, then that linkage between those people who are assigned to, break down and estimate those issues, that's coming a lot later. So if you're looking for feedback about a wide scope of how to, thinking about the realms of possibility or something in a place, then I would suggest just to ask the group, or just ask somebody, and maybe they can help you or not. Like if we're not ready to do the waiting bit yet, I would just reach out, and don't worry about if you need that kind of assistance.
Yeah, thank you both. So I agree. Like, if there's already some involvement on an issue, it is often quite easy to kind of continue that conversation or prod a little bit the people who are already involved to some extent. However, like weighting an issue, that means ideally, if I'm correct, that issue should already kind of have like a solution figured out for it. Like, it doesn't need to be an exact solution. It doesn't need to be, like, all right, we're 100% committed to this one thing and nothing else. But like, ideally, an issue should be more than what has been offered here. This has been an initial write-up by Orit. There's been some initial discussion, but like, there's gone little input into this. There's no cross-linking to any research. There's some research or some description of a potential solution. Like, if I'm correct, and please say if I'm not, I think it would be very hard for engineering to weight this in its current state, right? Like, this is impossible almost.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes the job more difficult. I think you're right about that.
Yeah. So and where I want to go, and I've seen that from other stage groups like release management, is that they are ahead of the curve enough. Like, I don't want to work months ahead, but I want to work enough ahead, like ideally 1 to 2, perhaps 3, but let's say between 1 and 2 milestones ahead, so that when weighting comes, when this comes into the needs weights issue, the engineer that is going to weight this issue was already involved in the ideation on the concept that issue is involved. So that is where I need the people. Like, ideally, I want no issues that go into needs weight that has some UX involvement in there to be unknown prior to that. So my current take on this is, asking engineering managers, like, hey, who can I work with this on in terms of front end and back end? And I think the most important point here is this is not a one-time request for contact. this is going to be a back and forth discussion, like, hey, I need some ideas from you, or hey, I'm thinking in such a way. What are your views? And then you respond back, and I come up with a second iteration. It's like a little bit of a sparring partner. So it might take up sometimes a little bit of time more than perhaps just like a glance, and like it's beyond breakdown. It's more than breakdown. It's a little bit of ideation and feedback from you involved. So, like, it will mean that those ideas and issues that will go into the milestone will be infused more by engineering. I think that is going to benefit us all. So in that case, is mentioning engineering managers the right approach, or is it more like I should just mention all engineers in progressive delivery and hope that somebody, like, who's going to be DRI? That's what I'm concerned with. It needs to be on somebody's radar.
Yeah.
So if I could just interject on that one. So when we say the needs weight issue, I think that's, and by the name of that issue, I could see where that would be kind of confusing, but I don't think the intention of that issue is that when the engineer is looking at it, they have all the answers and can just supply a weight. Because even in the description of the issue, you'll notice it says if you're performing the final review, right? But we have these issues assigned to each engineer. And if there's not enough information there to give a weight, I think that's the trigger, so to speak, that some conversation should be happening. On other teams, I've seen them actually separate needs research versus needs weight to kind of imply we think this one's ready for weighting, whereas this one just kind of needs additional discussion. We may want to consider that. The main thing, though, I think, is that we want to make sure that we're time boxing it as much as possible. Not that discussions aren't happening throughout the release cycle, but that engineers have that focus time for their current deliverables, and that we're trying to set aside some time for them to do this discovery and fleshing out. That would be kind of my perspective on that. I don't know if anyone else wants to give input there.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
I think one thing we could do with that issue going forward is kind of call out a little bit clearer what it is more suggested that is ready versus something that needs a little more research, because it makes time boxing hard if you just have a unorganized list of links to go through.
Can I ask, in terms of like time boxing, can you paint me a picture of what that means? Like, I know the term time boxing, but I mean, like, how would an issue, like, how would an engineer time box their time and then provide like that interaction with me? Like, how would that work?
What is that needs weight issue say? It says like an hour per issue or hour per estimation, something like that.
It says about 4 hours, approximately 4 hours.
Yeah.
I think the main idea, though, Dimitri, is that this week, which is generally kind of the first week in that milestone, is that time that the engineers are setting aside some time to do this, versus, you know, like the week of code cutoff and they're getting pulled in from design to get questions on something 3 weeks out, but they're trying to focus on getting things in. So from time box perspective, I think just the timing of when this issue is being looked at by the engineers is important. And to Andrew's point here, I'm going to just link one of the needs weight issues from release management, where we kind of separate out what we call research versus things that we feel are ready for the actual weighting. So that's one way that people I've seen do this, and we can consider maybe making that more clear on the needs weight issue, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. On the other hand, I want to want to make I'm trying to see how I can make the case more clear. So say, for example, this this implement blue-green switch issue is going to be in progress by me, because it's going to be like at some point. I don't know if this issue has been updated with the milestone, and perhaps there's some inconsistencies with my my epic, my planning epic versus the actual planning epic from Aura. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Like, this could be any issue. So what happens from my side is I'll go in progress on this issue. That means that I'll be actively pushing this issue forward. I'm gonna involve the people I need to be involved with. I'm gonna ideate, I'm gonna propose designs, and I'm gonna get feedback and iterate based on that feedback. That feedback, part of that feedback, I will need from engineering. And that means that it's not just in the first week of a milestone. That is something that is continuously going to happen throughout a milestone. Like sometimes an issue will be pushed out, or an issue will take longer than another issue. It is not something that, like, I'll probably need sometimes 5 to 10 minutes from an engineer every 2 to 3 days on a certain issue, and I will be working on 2 to 4 issues at a time. So that will mean that, you know, per 2 to 3 days, I'll need 20 to 40 minutes of an engineer, like, generally. So, like, I think you can time box it, but it is not just like, oh, this 1 week in a milestone, I need some time. I will need that time every week, like, continuously, because that is the way that issues go forward outside of the build track. I'm now thinking of the validation track, and I want to pull engineering in there because I think there's a huge amount of value that engineering can pull in there.
So just to clarify on that, I don't think that's not being, at least it wasn't my intention to imply that people can't comment on issues prior to this week time period. I think that there just has to be some awareness of the engineers trying to get their deliverables in. And if it's a high level, hey, what do you think about this? Then of course, you know, they can comment. If they're going to be needing to spend some time to dig in, find out if something's possible, see what the code is doing now, I think that's where we need to make sure it's assigned on one of these issues, and they have that designated time to dig in, especially if it's an item that's not clearly fleshed out and needs some more discovery, put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of it's a matter of time prioritization and managing expectations, right? You don't want to, like, I don't know. I think yeah. If you just have a list of issues to kind of comb through, you're gonna try and do that in like the designated time, or at least I am anyways. But if you're mid milestone or something and you're very clearly calling out that you need some you just want like some quick answers on how things are working now or something like that, that's yeah, I think as long as you're clear about calling it out, then it's less of an issue, right? Because we know going in what kind of like is expected.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of hearing two themes. I know we're at the end of the meeting. I kind of want to propose something, which I think might be a nice action item coming out of this first meeting. So I hear needs weight issue. I hear you know, those last 2 points by you, Andrew, like time prioritization, managing expectations, kind of come down as I feel like the needs weight issue is kind of like the focal point that engineering uses to spend their time wisely, understand that engineering needs to commit to their time for the deliverables. At the same time, you know, like some of this work that product management, product design works on ahead of the curve kind of goes unnoticed, or is less trackable, less obvious that it needs input. So how about the suggestion of me making it visible on which 2 to 4 issues I need currently input from engineering on a continuous basis, and put that into the needs weight UX needs weight engineering issue. And that way, kind of like you'll tackle your prioritized issues first, but then we can assign, hey, I have this little list of issues that I need engineering input on. You can decide whoever's going to be on what, but for a lot of the issues, I will probably need someone from backend and front end. And then I immediately know, all right, those 2 people I need. Hey, I added this issue, I removed this issue because we changed something in progress because of planning changes. How does that proposal sound?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, like, use that needs weight issue as a place for discussion as well as just assignment. If, like, we know, yeah, see if we can reuse it and push that there instead of having something separate to also track.
I think too, we can try that, but we may want to consider having, like we were talking about, just calling it out for specific engineers, because I think if you keep a general list, you may not get the feedback you're looking for, versus if we have people's names tied to it, that's when you're going to probably get more results. So just something to think about there. We can always try it though and go.
Yeah, I was thinking of like that list that features the issue name or the issue ID, whatever, and then you'll assign like specific people after that. Like, hey, I notify you of like, hey, I've added this new issue to the list. I've removed this other one because it's less important now, but I need like either a front end or a back end or both, and then you put, I don't know, a name on the list, and then everybody knows who like needs to watch where. And that would be immensely helpful to know, all right, who am I, who's going to be my collaborators in pushing this new thing forward. I'll be the RI, but I need feedback sometimes. I know now who to ask for. All right, thank you so much. I'll make that a reality. I'll push the other things for the next meeting. I think this was already immensely helpful. I think there's going to be some interesting items for the next ones as well. So for example, how do we like push merge requests forward? When do we involve reviews after forward? There's also a continuing conversation in the larger UX department. Anyway, lots to discuss, and mostly in order to make us as iterative as we can be. So thanks so much for joining this session. See you next time. Bye-bye.